Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Inevitable, that podcast that is an unparalleled orgy of death, because this week we watched Gigashadow.
Written by Jeffery Hirschfield, Paul Donovan, and Lexx Gigeroff.
Directed by Robert Sigel.
And aired on September 11th, 1997. Just 4 years before 9/11.
And not just like days before and days after any other good science fiction was aired. Pick literally any day in the week surrounding when this episode was aired. Bet something better aired.
Yeah. For this entire watch through of Lexx, I'd been hoping that we would come around. After we disliked the first episode, I was like, all right, give it a chance. Maybe the second episode will be better. After watching that one, I held out hope. I was like, there could be something, even if it's just a glimmer of brilliance in episode 3 or 4 that wins us over and makes us go, you know what? Guess that's why people like Lexx. Episode 3 was really dull, but for some reason, I was still holding on, saying like they could bring it around in this season finale, or this finale to the Lexx TV movies. There could be something about this that makes us go, you know what? This wasn't so bad after all, and that maybe there's a little hope for the future of the series, aka Season 2. But no, there wasn't.
Yeah, I've never seen a show with such a spectacularly awful first season that has made me so... that has made me so completely convinced that watching any more would not change my opinion on anything on the show.
No, and I mean, this is probably a discussion best kept for the end of the episode, but we're probably not going to be continuing on with Lexx.
Yeah, before we get to that discussion, though, we have to try and piece together the sheer boredom that we just sat through an hour and a half of. I have multiple notes that are like, words cannot describe how little I care about what's actually happening on screen right now.
Yeah, this is one of the few TV episodes I've ever watched that if I were to rate out of 10, I would give a 0 out of 10. I wouldn't even give that to Lexx episodes 1, 2, or 3, but I would to this one.
There is like, and I used to talk about this with my roommate, there is an element of like things that are bad. If they're still entertaining, they're not the worst they could be. They're like cardinal sin, in my opinion, that any entertainment medium, but more specifically TV or movies, like the biggest cardinal sin they can commit is being boring.
That's actually, it's funny you bring that up, because as soon as I finished watching this, I thought about Troll 2, And I was, okay, well, look, I'm going somewhere with this. I was like,
okay, okay.
Ever since we watched Troll 2 for our movie trilogy podcast, Triple Play, which I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. If you haven't watched Troll 2, you owe yourself to watch it because of just what it is. But like, ever since we watched that, I was like, yeah, Troll 2, that's the worst movie ever made, the worst one I've ever watched in my life. But like, after having watched Gigashadow, I was like, you know what? Troll 2, like, I got some enjoyment out of... No, compared to Gigashadow, no. I was like, I got some enjoyment out of Troll 2. Like, and just watching that and, like, for the pod, like, I don't know. I'm reconsidering that as the worst movie now. Like, I got enjoyment out of it. Just how ineptly it was made.
Yeah, exactly my point is, like, bad movies that are enjoyable, you still at least, it wasn't like a waste watching it, because you got some enjoyment, which is the reason you watch TVs or movies most of the time, unless you're crazy podcasters who watch things because people tell you to.
Yeah.
So like, for a movie or a TV show to be boring, then it's like, then it was just a waste of time, and it's like, well, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, Lexx really put me off right from the beginning with just its weirdness, and I didn't like it. From the first 30 seconds, I didn't like it. But it's like, this episode almost trades some of the weird, like, kookiness for just boredom, almost. Like, it's not, maybe this is just me, tell me if you agree, but it's not as, like, weird as the other ones.
There's some pretty weird things in this episode. I don't know, the Gigashadow being a giant roly-poly in space, the, like, Divine Shadow jumping from body to body. But I do agree that on the whole, there were probably less weird concepts. You know, there's no, like, Mad Max Thunderdome-esque world like there was an eating pattern.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe we just got used to Lex's weirdness and we're like, yeah, this is just normal now.
No, I don't think so. I hope not. I hope not.
What if nothing is ever the same again after having watched Lexx?
Everything changes, you might say?
Yeah, Torchwood. Trust your doctor, our Doctor Who / Torchwood podcast.
Well, the episode opens with the Lexx recap as usual, and then a, like, 5-minute lore dump from, like...
The episode begins, the audacity they had when writing this thing. The episode begins with a recap, followed by another recap.
Look. If there's one thing out of everything I will absolutely give Lexx credit for, it's the sheer audacity to do 2 recaps in a row. I've never in my life seen anything show 2 completely separate recaps with different but slightly overlapping content immediately one after the other. It's a sheer masterclass in how not to write a script, in all honesty.
I will... something that I also will give Lexx credit for is, like, the audacity to put any of this in front of people on screens. Like, just the entirety of it is just... It's bonkers. And, like, not in a good way, but... In a way that makes me go,
there's
like,
an element,
damn,
yeah.
They had, I don't know.
People paid them money to make this. Right. And they convinced TV shows to air it. There is an element of awe in that.
Yeah.
For 4 seasons! I mean, this was airing, like, alongside, like, Star Trek Voyager, you know, Farscape. These are classics of sci-fi cinema, so that makes it even more impressive in a weird, twisted sort of way.
This is also considered to be a classic. Like, again, it's weird for us because of how much we both dislike this show, but we're actually the outliers, and that's something I have to keep reminding myself of. Like, this, too, is almost considered... Maybe not a classic, but it's beloved still. Definitely.
I know. As usual with the outliers, but that still shocks me. We have an email from Sergeant Trano answering my call for people who genuinely like this show. And, yeah, well, it's a thing.
Yep. What's also a thing is, and just something that boggles my mind, is that this episode contains a subplot that, you know, we always joke, like, if we were in charge, things would be different, and we say something, like, weird or something stupid, or we make it a joke, like The Rock playing the Doctor or something. But, like, I mean, if I was in charge of this episode, this would have been, like, the first thing I just excised. Like, this would have been gone in seconds flat. The whole subplot with the 2 guys who abduct Stanley.
Yeah. Yeah. Feppo and S'more.
S'more. Oh my god. I didn't know his name. I haven't had s'mores in years. Kind of want one, actually, now that you say that. And I never like...
Damn, you're right.
I never have that experience that people often report having, I say in such a clinical manner, but that people often say, like, man, I want blank now that you said that. I almost never have that experience, but guess I know what it feels like.
Damn, I really want s'mores now. Shoot.
Anyway, the gist of this second recap is that it's the time seer lady that we've seen a couple times, and she's like, the rebirth is coming, the Gigashadow is nigh.
And then she explains that, like, okay, this is like my biggest problem immediately, was that she explains that everybody on the
cluster
cluster gets harvested and their meat fed to, like, grow the Gigashadow. And I'm like, man, if I was writing this, I guess since we're doing that, scrap revealing that, make it a mystery that the Lexx has to solve. The crew of the Lexx have to solve. They get there, everybody's dead. What the hell happened? And then we learn along with them that they killed all of them to feed the Gigashadow. It gives a lingering sense of dread, makes a mystery for there to be solved. As it stands, there's just no tension at all, because that that's what happened. The Gigashadow's there. The instant they get there, his divine shadow's going to be like, what up? Look at my new ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some sort of like dramatic irony later on where it's like, exactly what happened, but the characters don't, and it's just like, yeah, it's what you described would probably be a lot more enjoyable, at least more tense.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just another one of those squandered opportunities that Lexx likes to chuck at you from time to time.
Yeah, but, smash cut back to the Lexx. Zev's like, yo, I really need some dick, and Stanley is not cutting it. Look, this season of Inevitable has an explicit tag. I'm just going to go for him.
Sure, why not? You're forgetting the best part of this scene, though, and by best I mean worst, which is that for the billionth time we have to hear All Night next to the Zev I Lay. Swear to God, if I ever have to hear that again, I'm going to put a bullet through my head right then and there.
All Night by the Zev. All Night by the Zev I Lay. Don't forget we also hear All Night by the Stan. All Night by the Stan something.
I rejoiced. Shoot me for remembering that. I rarely ever vehemently dislike / flat out hate fictional characters, but my God, 790 tempted me to do so much.
Oh, I'm just gonna say I just hate 790. I'm just gonna say it. I have no qualms about saying that, honestly.
Yeah. Bravo, Lexx, for making the droid, some of the most endearing characters usually, into just the worst.
Yeah. The absolute literally the worst character. The characters aren't great. Let's be honest, but the worst of all of them.
No, and the characters aren't great, but it's like, after these 4 episodes, I'll say I don't mind Stan and Zev and Kai. I don't. I think they're in bad stories. I think they're just in a bad, universe. But if you took their dynamic and their characters and kind of did something better with it, I think it could work. But for that to happen and for that to work, you need to just remove 790 from the equation.
Yeah, you just have to cut 790 completely. Just cut 790. Anyway, Zev's... I was not kidding. She's really like, I need to bring Kai back, and he's going to die if we don't, so we got to go back to the cluster. And Stanley's like, that's a death wish. If we go to the cluster, we die. And 790 is like, reluctantly, he's got a point. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he does. I mean, yeah. What turns him around?
Yeah.
I forget what eventually convinces him to go back to the cluster. Well, I think it's not for a while actually that they do that, because
it's not for a while.
Yeah, a lot of this episode takes place on the Lexx, and that's actually something that I, after having watched this episode, realized is that like the Lexx itself is pretty interesting. Like, maybe it's not visually the best spaceship ever. That maybe still goes to the Liberator from Blake 7. But it's like, I honestly wish we explored more of the Lexx because it's like it's this huge ship and it's like it's organic and I don't know. I was after watching this, I was like, man, that was another squandered opportunity. There is like the Lexx is pretty cool. Maybe they explore it in later seasons, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe. There are a lot of cool things about the Lexx, and you know, every time we always mention the like the chasm that is the inside, or the chasm that is the inside of the Lexx, like the interior volume of the Lexx. But you know, not to you know, not to be for us, I guess.
No. Well, we see Stan conversing with the shadow brains, and they describe a little flashback for Stanley, so we get a little bit more of his backstory. Now, this dives into the subplot for this episode that I said would have just been not in the episode if I were, you know, in charge or something like that. Basically, in his earlier days, maybe not in his youth, but earlier on, maybe a couple years ago, Stanley was planning on, I don't even, it's not contextualized all that well, but like, he was basically going to come up with some excuse for why he needed to go to this sort of pleasure planet or something like that. In the process, he gets stranded out in space, and he gets picked up by this guy who comes on video record or video, who sends over a video message or starts contacting him and tells him it's not a video message because they're talking, but like he contacts him and convinces him that they're going to save him. And he makes a good point. He's like, what choice do you have? It's either us or you stay stranded out here in space. So Stan's like, okay, like, all right. He boards their ship and there's these two guys who I guess, I don't know, maybe roam the cosmos or something. And they're into some sort of BDSM-esque stuff.
Yeah, just
guy
weird
has like
stuff.
Yeah, the one guy has like the worst hair I've ever seen in my life. It's like, so he has, I don't know if you noticed this because it's a little subtle, flies under the radar a bit, but so he has the half shaved head and then the half like, I don't even know what you would call it, just kind of combed back-ish. But then like his mustache is the opposite of that. So half the mustache is shaved and half is there, but it's the opposite half with his hair.
I'm gonna be honest, did not actually notice that. No.
Yeah. So he has a little. It's not a full beard, right? It's just a mustache, but it's like, yeah.
Ooh, fashion disasters brought to you by Lexx.
It was actually weird because in their final scene, he doesn't have the mustache, like it's shaved off. So
well, time skip.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, come to think of it, it's probably just the time skip, but like, yeah. I can't believe this entire subplot made it into the episode. I know I keep reiterating that, but it's mind-boggling, honestly. If there's one thing Lexx consistently does and does well, it's boggle the mind.
Boggle the mind, yeah. Well, anyway. Eventually, Stanley's just like, you know what? Fine. I guess we can go back to the cluster. We also learn during the we learned during the like second recap that there was during the revival of his divine shadow, they were going to put his divine shadow's consciousness into the Gigashadow, the ship itself. That there was a sort of a revolt led by a couple people who were like, no, we can't let this go through, and they do succeed at stopping everything from going through, but not, nobody survives, basically. The voiceover is like, none of the 8 survived.
Right. So basically what happens on the rest of the Lex segment is that Kai wakes up. He and Zev has some sort of they have some conversations. They talk about some existential, stuff. They find a cluster lizard, a baby one that they name Squishy. And
No, just Squish.
Oh,
It's not even
Squish.
something as exciting as Squishy.
Yeah, you're right. It's just Squish. Zev also tries to eat Stanley multiple times.
Yeah, I was like, is everybody in this universe a cannibal? Because it feels weird that they keep coming back to the cannibal plotline in all these episodes. Did the writers, were they really that, like, strapped for plot lines?
I think it's just that she's part cluster lizard, so she tries to eat him.
Yeah, but it is kind of weird that there's been a cannibal in every episode 4 episodes in a row.
Yeah, true. I can't believe cluster lizards look like bugs. I mean, God, they don't even look like lizards. It just looks like a little grub or something.
Yeah, it's just a thing that eats.
Oh man, the funniest...
Likes eating brains.
I just remembered the funniest part of this episode, which is that they're discussing the proto-blood that Kai needs, and they're discussing going back to the cluster because that's the only place where they can get it. And, they spill half of Kai's remaining proto-blood, rendering his life half as long as it was before.
Yeah, they were trying to find out how to make the proto-blood by going through the memories of the previous divine shadows that Kai got when he got his memory back. Because if you remember, he got his memory back by interacting with the brain of the divine shadow who killed him.
Yeah, as a side note to that, I didn't realize... I was kind of aware, but I wasn't fully, cognizant of Kai's backstory until this episode. Yeah. I didn't fully get it until this episode, I should say.
Well, better late than never.
Wait a minute. If they spill the proto-blood here, how come they don't realize what it looks like later?
Well, because it changed. There's a scene. Actually, they do explain this. For everything Lex does bad, at least they did this. They did actually explain that, the appearance of the proto-blood was different. Over time.
Okay.
Or that there's a different kind of proto-blood. I think it was actually because they were like, the cultist comes back to life, and they're like, how do you come back? And they're like, oh, probably like a different kind of proto-blood, like a different version.
Anyway, we get to see a bit of Stanley's softer side. He's trying to fix the cryo chamber for Kai. And then, I guess they decide, all right, fine, we'll go back to the cluster. Fine.
Yeah. Well, because there's I completely lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah, there's the question of whether or not they can travel through the fractal core to get back to the light universe. And 790 is like, yeah, I mean, it's a mirror of itself, so, we can take the same path back that we took to get here.
Yeah, I completely forgot about the whole light universe, dark universe thing. By this point, I'd forgotten, even though they reminded us every single episode. I guess just shows you how much I've cared about Lex. So yeah, they go back. Stan doesn't want to go down to the planet because he's scared, so he stays on the ship, and they're like, no, whatever you do, even if we communicate with you, don't communicate with us, because signals can be tracked.
Yeah, but then as soon as they leave, they're like, okay, broadcast on this specific frequency. Hey, guess what, gang? I control the most powerful ship in the galaxy. Yeah, it's me, your boy, Stanley Tweedle. Welcome to my crib. This is MTV's Pimp Your Cribs with me, Stanley Tweedle.
Yeah, the Lex really does need some redecoration, to be honest.
And it gets picked up by exactly who they thought it would be, which is, like I said, Fwapo and S'more, or whatever, Feppo and S'more, S'more.
Meanwhile, Zev and Kai are searching for proto-blood, but they quickly realize that something has gone awry, aka Ari. It's actually not also pronounced Ari. I just heard someone say it that way once, and it's like 10 years ago, and it's stuck with me, so... And that person was me. No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
That person was me.
But no, yeah, things have gone awry. Obviously, everyone's dead.
Right. And they just kind of walk around for a bit, and they're like, what happened here? And then they like walk up to the brain of the Divine Shadow, and he's like, hey, guess what? The evil part of me died when I fell off that podium, so I'm like good now. Can you forgive me? And Kai's like, no, lol, I'm going to kill you now.
Yeah, so he kind of just squishes the brain. Not fully, but kind of. They won't.
Yeah, we see a black kind of smoke come out of it after they leave.
You see the smoke again, I'm right about this, right? You see that smoke again in Kai's eye at the end that's what that was?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to be sure. Anyway, yeah, they wander around for a bit more, and they wind up in some sort of underground, aqueous area. They think the ground is like covered in a not too deep layer of liquid, and they think it's proto-blood, but it's not. And this is when...
Yeah, they test it, but no.
Yeah, this is when one of the cultists from before you find out isn't dead. He comes back. This is when they, again, speculate that he's using some form of proto-blood, and they realize that the viscous liquid from up above that they'd seen before was actually proto-blood. Kai then keels over, starts dying, and Zev rushes up to collect the blood.
Yeah, they gather up a bunch of it, but then, the cultist is like, hey, you gotta kill me right now. The Divine Shadow is inside my head. I can only hold him back for so long, but I need you to literally just kill me.
He tries to kill himself, too, doesn't he? He tries to stab himself. But it doesn't work because he's already dead. He's just been reanimated.
Right.
The Divine Shadow then just like, or the Gigashadow, I should say, just devours him.
Yeah, because they need to get the Divine Shadow's consciousness into the brain of the Gigashadow.
Yeah, and how they do that is they chop off his head. You see his head like elongate, his neck rather, to lengths that no neck should ever elongate. No human neck, at least. Meanwhile, Stanley has picked up a distress signal that he, at this point in the episode, appears to fall for, even though it's obviously fake. And it's what were the names? Feppo and S'more?
Yeah.
They're like, we meet again, Stanley Tweedle.
Yeah, they have a whole thing where they've got a fake they've got a fake...
They have like a facial capture device.
Yeah, mocap device.
What that? So, okay, the last, maybe 15 or 20 minutes of this episode, like the first episode, actually, are a blur to me.
Because it was just so dull.
They also felt like they took an hour to get through, but... Yeah, what the hell happens to Kai and Zev at this point?
Kai gets stuck on the Gigashadow. Kai gets stuck on the Gigashadow, and Zev makes a break for it to leave, and 790's like, yeah, we gotta get out of here. Everything's gonna blow. The Gigashadow takes off. And so Zev is in space, and she's like, oh my god, we're gonna get killed by the Gigashadow. We need Stanley. Stanley, for the second week in a row, I was wrong, and you were right.
Mm-hmm.
And then Stanley shows up in the Lexx, completely unexplained how he escaped Feppo and S'more.
for now.
Well, actually, I think first there is a scene where Feppo responds like, "Oh, Stanley's indisposed right now," and we see him in his sex swing.
Oh my God.
And then later on, like right when the Gigashadow is going to kill them, he shows up in the Lexx, and he's like, "Hey, hit the Gigashadow with everything you've got," and it does no damage to the Gigashadow at all.
Oh right, and then it's Squish who digs into the Gigashadow's massive brain, eats it from the inside out. Oh man, we skipped another funny part from the episode where another actually funny part where like the consciousness of the divine shadow appears and explains the 2,000-year plan that is now coming to fruition. Which is that basically the divine shadow, this is all like, this comes across again so poorly. Like Lexx does such a poor job of it because like, how much of this did we already know? How much of it were we supposed to know? I don't know. Like how much is this supposed to be reveal? I have no clue whatsoever. It could have just been me not paying attention. I really didn't know. But yeah, this was basically all in the works from the beginning or something.
Yeah, this whole thing was set in motion by the lady who could see into time in the future, in the past. I don't know.
I don't know. And at this point in the episode, there were like 15 minutes left, and I was just like, I don't care. The point is, Squish saves the day. Kai is now rejuvenated. He has this supply of proto blood, which I'm guessing won't last forever. They'll have to go back and get more, right?
Probably. I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of something that I was wondering at the end of this.
Yeah, it's like
that was, they've just got another finite source of proto blood. It's not like they've actually solved the inherent problem.
Right. I guess it's probably safe to go back to the cluster and get more now, but yeah, they don't really address it, so whatever. But they're all safe. They're all in the Lexx, and they decide to roam the universe looking for a home. And the last thing you see is a zoom in on Kai's eye, and you see the Divine Shadow smoke, or what appears to be the Divine Shadow smoke in his eye.
Yeah, we're ending on a cliffhanger. But not before we find out how Stanley escaped from Feppo and the gang, which was that he too had a master plan he set up in advance, which was just the Lexx was just gonna eat Feppo's ship and then like spit Feppo and S'more out, and he apparently called them on purpose. I think there is. Damn, I can't believe I actually understand all of this. He did explain, or it is explained, I think Stanley explains it in his message originally calling for them, that they stole from him the protein sequence that ended up being used to make the Lexx, and so that's how that protein sequence got into the hands of his Divine Shadow, and why people blame Stanley Tweedle for the downfall of the 100, although he says it's actually 94 resistance planets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he wanted to go after them. They stole the protein sequence, and they're the reason the Divine Shadow built the Lexx. So he wanted revenge, and they end up on a planet with like some giants, I guess, who are going to eat them. Again, cannibalism.
Yep. That's Lexx, Season 1, aka the Lexx TV movies.
Jeez, that was torturous. It was rough.
We made it. We made it through the other side. We started in the light universe, and then Lexx plunged us into the darkness. And now we're back. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say that I haven't said over the past 3 to 4 weeks. Lexx, one of my least favorite shows, probably, that I've ever watched. I liked almost none of it.
We also didn't explain that like the divine shadow when he's got the Gigashadow is like, oh, the insect wars are going to begin again, and it's also revealed that his divine shadow was never human to begin with, but was always an insect, basically an insect consciousness, an insect brain using a human's body. He says something like, "Yeah, I figured it would be easier to destroy humans from the inside." And that's why all the Divine Shadow ships look like insects.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was all part of the 2,000-year master plan. Which is interesting. I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched those videos or whatever, but there are various organisms, some of them bug-like, a lot, parasites or whatever that control minds, right? Some of them get into I don't know, like frogs or amphibious creatures, and they start controlling their body and stuff like that. So kind of interesting there. Or controlling fish or something. But I'll put some more about that in the show notes because I kind of forgot the details. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting that like the Divine Shadow is sort of just this parasite or something.
Yeah, well, again, so much cool and interesting lore here in this universe that's just delivered so badly.
It's honestly really impressive how much Lexx fails to be good at every turn. It's like every new wrinkle, every twist, every plot element they added, and there were a lot. I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot going on in Lexx at any given moment. Like every single one of those, you're like, all right, is it gonna be interesting now? Is it gonna be good? No, it's not.
Yeah, you keep holding, and that's the thing is like even though it's bad and it fails, it's also insidious, and there's just enough there that you keep hoping that it's going to be good, and then well, nope.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I also think just the premise wasn't for us too, because it's like the sex-based infantile humor, like, all right, I'm already turned off by just the idea of it, and I mean Lexx goes pretty far with it. The gross out humor with the like disgusting substances that constantly appear on screen, not something I'm super into. And I don't know, just the honestly pathetic characters with few redeeming qualities, also not something I'm super into. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's just everybody was unlikable. There was no one you really rooted for. At the end of the show, I didn't even like Stanley anymore. I was just like, it's fine to have a character who's so pathetic that you're like actively rooting against him or actively not rooting for him, but you can't have a character who's pathetic like that along with your only other characters being the sex-crazed Zev whose entire motivation is just to get the next high, and a dead guy who's in cryosleep 50% of every episode, and then a crazy robot head whose just only purpose is to fawn over the artificial sex slave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, though, like, I don't know if I'm articulating this, or I don't even know where I would go with this, but it's like, I think you could definitely take Stanley and Zev and Kai's, like, dynamic and characters and, like, just do that better in some other, I don't know, hypothetical universe or show or something, so.
Sure thing. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. So I guess we can get into some segments.
Yep.
Do we usually do the actors before the emails? I think we do.
Yeah, we do.
All right, well, why don't you start?
All right, well, I looked up Malcolm McDowell, who plays, I'm sure he had a name, but he was one of the Divine Shadow cultists, the guys in the purple robes. He was the one who came back, so he was the most important of the bunch. He's actually had a really extensive career dating back to the 60s. He's been in some pretty famous things. He was in A Clockwork Orange, just going through Voyage of the Damned,
Mm-hmm.
The 1979 Caligula, which I believe was actually a big deal, or something like that. Just going through. He was in a lot of things. A lot of them I don't recognize, but I'm trying to look for the ones that I do. And I'm sure that's just me. I'm sure he Night Train to Venice. He was in 1993. Cyborg 3: The Recycler in 1994. He was in Star Trek Generations. He was in Y2K, whatever. I'll just start reading off ones randomly. Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures. I Spy in 2002. Red Roses and Petrol, Pact with the Devil. Pinocchio 3000. I have no idea what that is. Dinotopia, Quest for the Ruby Sunstone. Halloween 2 in 2009. Super Rhino. He's had a lot of voice roles. He's had not as many as not actual, but live action roles. But he's done a lot of voice acting. It seems like as well.
Mm-hmm.
He has an entire television career as well. I'm looking on Wikipedia for some reason instead of IMDb like I normally do, so they separate them out. But yeah, he's had an extensive career in television as well. He was in Monk. He was in the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. And a Chalk Zone.
Nice.
I don't know if you've ever watched that or have heard of it.
I've heard of it. I never watched it.
Yeah, I think I've watched it like twice or something like that. It was the show about that kid who had this magic stick of chalk that let him go into the Chalk Zone or something like that. He was in Robot Chicken. Yeah, he's had a lot of voice roles on TV as well. Phineas and Ferb, CSI Miami. That wasn't a voice role, obviously, but he was in it. Kung Fu Panda, Legends of Awesomeness. I think we've watched that. Didn't we watch parts of that? Or an episode of it or something for Triple Play?
Maybe.
He's in Star Wars.
Maybe.
He was in Star Wars Rebels for 2 episodes. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, anyway.
That's him.
That's him. All right, well. Keon said this week I had to look up the actor with all the complicated British things.
German, you mean?
German, sorry. And so Michael Habbick, who plays Feppo. Well, let's get the English ones out of the way. He was also in the Bourne Identity TV movie.
Hey, we've watched that.
And let's see. That's there are a couple other English titles here, Asterix and Obelix. A couple German TV shows with English names. Dr. Snuggles. All right, I guess that's a thing. Let's see here. A bunch of... and The Name of the Rose, I think is his most famous credit. It's a movie with Sean Connery. Anyway, let's see here. Gunig ist nicht Gunig. Der Sushi Baron.
God.
Du Boel von Tols. Zwiem Groschen See. Oh man. Ein Goner Gottes. Oh, jeez. Wehenaxmann Eberboard.
Yeah, 35-letter German word.
Jeez. Oh, jeez. Gieste Jager Jean Sinclair. Im Namen des Gesetzes. Jeez. I hate this.
You can stop at any time.
All right, one more. Das glücklich Leben des Gunther Gastenfrosch.
Oh my god. Yeah, it was pretty good. Probably not, actually.
The German people are listening, are cringing in their seats.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Email time, I guess.
Yep.
Okay, so the first email from Sergeant Drano here is subject line, why I unironically like Lexx, which is a response to, on Supernova, we asked anybody who unironically likes Lexx to let us know why. Hey guys, you wanted feedback from fans who unironically like Lexx and not just because of the TNA. I definitely fall into that category and I will do my best to explain why. I first saw Lexx on the Sci-Fi Channel when they aired Season 2 out of order following Farscape. Farscape is a more conventional sci-fi show, and I started out more interested in Farscape and just occasionally catching the odd Lexx episode afterwards. Like I said before, Sci-Fi was only billing Lexx as, quote, something strange, close quote, and airing it out of order without the context of Season 1, so it was really confusing viewing. Initially, it did just seem like a confusing oddball of a show with nothing particularly complex, but at the same time, it was literally unlike anything else I had seen before. Everything about it was unconventional. From the characters, the setting, the worlds, the plots, it was different and new, and I had this sense of something beneath the surface, a feeling of wanting to make sense of this show. We are presented with these main characters who are indeed rather unlikable in a lot of ways, but also incredibly flawed and human in a way that felt real to me. Let's face it, if we found ourselves in extraordinary situations like these, we would probably turn out a lot more like Stanley Tweedle than we would be a Blake and Avon or a more conventional hero type. Lexx also excels at making you feel uncomfortable while you're watching it. It raises some real moral conundrums, and you want these characters to make the right choices, and they often don't. But when they don't, you get this little tickle at the back of your mind saying, wouldn't you be tempted to make the same bad choice? I did not like Lexx to start with. It felt skeevy, it made me uncomfortable, but the more I watched it, the more it sucked me in, the more I began to see that Lexx has a complexity and especially pathos that normal, quote, normal, unquote, sci-fi shows just don't. That said, it did not truly grab me until I saw a Season 2 episode called Brigadoon, which was the episode that revealed to me some of the epic background mythology that I had no idea existed until then. It was only after that that I hunted down the Season 1 movies and saw how it all began, so maybe part of the reason I like it is that my original exposure wasn't an initial lore dump like you guys had. I got dropped in the middle of it and only later learned about the beginning. You guys have disparaged the special effects. I don't really understand that. You guys have seen far crappier effects than this and have still managed to suspend your disbelief and get into the story. You guys say the acting is not good except for Stanley. I don't really get this either. It's not Shakespeare, but I think the actors playing the five mains are all doing a fine job of bringing their characters to life. Keon mentioned finding parts of it boring. Considering the bland dullness of some of the stuff you guys have watched, including the Prisoner reboot, that's a bit of a shock to me. I've heard Lexx called many things, but I don't think I've ever heard it called boring. And as much as you guys talk about disliking it, I swear your discussions about it are so animated, that too is hard to swallow. But hey, personal taste is what it is. If everybody liked the same stuff, that'd be really dull. That said, I still hope you will stick with it at least through Season 2. I don't expect you to go directly from Season 1 to 2, but I hope you will cover Season 2 at some point. Shorter episodes, different format, and the season that made me fall in love with the show. This is a story that makes for a great discussion. Sergeant Drano, Station 7, The Door. See, I don't know. I don't agree with the fact that we've seen far crappier effects than this. Maybe, I don't know. I think there's a difference between practical effects and digital effects. And for me personally, if I see a crappy low-budget practical effect, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because at least it feels to me like they put effort into it. If it's a crappy digital effect where there could have been a practical effect, I think that's just lazy, and I don't give the show a pass on that. And there's actually a moment in this that perfectly illustrates that point. When Zev and Kai are looking through Kai's memories to find how the proto-blood was made, there's a screen in front of them displaying the memories. And when the kind of feedback loop happens that causes Kai to get hurt and Zev to go flying forward, she crashes through the screen. Now, this is something that really easily could have been a practical effect. Just have a screen there, have her crash through it and fall on the ground. It's really not difficult. But she crashes through a digital screen and you see digital like panes of glass flying off from her crashing through the screen. Like, it's just so lazy. And so I'd like, I don't know, just me personally, if it's a crappy, to use that terminology, crappy practical effect, I'm more inclined to kind of suspend my disbelief because there's kind of effort behind it and it feels real. Whereas, a crappy digital effect is just like, I don't know, feels lazy. Just feels like they did it because they could and they didn't want to put the effort in.
Wow, harsh.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm pretty sure we're never going to do Lexx again. So you know what? I'm just going to go in at this point.
I definitely understand the appeal that Sergeant Drano is talking about, though. If Lexx was to him this sort of, weird show that was like almost like sort of just this rare, not rare, but I don't even know what word you'd use to describe it, but this ungraspable thing, right? It's like it probably came on late. It was after the show he was actually planning on watching, or the show he actually wanted to watch, and it was like he was watching it out of order, and it was just this experience of like, man, this, like, what's going on, this, and yeah, exactly what he mentioned, a puzzle he had to put together. I definitely understand the appeal of that, or how that might have endeared him to the show a lot more.
Yeah, and maybe season 2 is just like better. Maybe starting with season 2 is like, it's like starting with, look, people say that the prequels are good movies or bad movies or whatever. Fine. I think, though, that it's generally agreed upon that they're not as good as the original trilogy, right? And so, maybe it's like starting with the original trilogy, you're more likely to forgive some of the mistakes that the prequel trilogies make, rather than if you just started like, if you started with Phantom Menace, you'd be, I feel like, in a way, kind of like totally lost in some parts, and maybe you would dislike it more. Maybe you're more likely to dislike it that way, and maybe that's what happened with us with Lexx. I don't know.
Who knows? I mean, like Sergeant Drano said, not everything's for everyone. And, how boring it would be if everything was if everyone just had the same opinions about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, unfortunately, we just didn't like Lexx, like, at all.
I mean, the proof of that is in the pudding, how he called the Prisoner reboot boring, and we didn't find it boring. So that just, proves that not everything is for everybody.
Yep.
So we have a second email from Sergeant Drano about Gigashadow. And so we come to the end of it. A whole lot of recap at the start of this one. First, you get the standard Lexx recap intro, and that immediately goes into the Time Prophet telling us all about his shadow, the cleansing, and the Gigashadow. I really liked the Time Prophet. I love his super dramatic delivery. Since this is kind of another lore dump, I guess you guys probably hated it. I liked the introduction of these rebel clerics led by this week's guest star Malcolm McDowell. Love how a cleric has to activate the column by disintegrating his head and hands in that evil photocopier. Did you guys dig that odd clown robot thing that rolls around chipper shredding the human bodies and then squirting their meat down to the Gigashadow? Fans tend to either love or hate Squish, the baby cluster lizard. My wife and I like him so much we named one of our cats after him. Fun interplay between Stanley and the brains. We learn how Stan was captured by the sub-ends. This was one of those parts that made me feel really uncomfortable watching it. How about you? Yes. Nice seeing Stan agonize over whether or not to return to the cluster to help Kai, and we see that he does have a little courage, finally deciding to try it. We get a little more insight into Kai's character, i.e. not being particularly motivated one way or the other, compelled to fulfill a prophecy, yet having no real feeling of accomplishment about it. We also hear a little more about Zev being raised in a box by holograms and how you were the first real people I ever met. She's smart, but has a tremendous lack of knowledge gained by experience due to her limited experience with other human beings. It is interesting to see 790 agree with Stan about the dangers of returning to the cluster. The approach to the cluster is nicely creepy, with the outpost proclaiming this outpost has been cleansed. It was neat seeing, quote, good, unquote, divine shadow with the evil part of his brain destroyed. Ironically, if Kai hadn't crushed the rest of it, the Yatskri might never have gotten possessed. How did you guys like the reveal of his shadow being the last surviving member of the insect civilization? I liked it, though I will admit that some of those visuals towards the end were on the goofy side. Still a satisfying conclusion to this arc. Did you catch what was going on in Kai's eyes at the last shot of the movie? In some versions, that effect was removed. Not sure what version you guys ended up with. Well, that was answered. On the whole, this is my second favorite of the Season 1 movies. Here's a topic of discussion for you. If Dylan and Keon were commissioned to write Season 2 of Lexx, what changes would you guys make in order to improve it? All the best, Sergeant Drano, Station 7, The Door.
Oh, God.
Well, I have some ideas in mind. First off,
Kill off 790. It's the first thing
fire
I
the
would do is kill off
cinematographer.
790.
Oh, okay. Okay, the first thing on screen I would do is that, but the first thing off screen I'm doing is firing the cinematographer and hiring someone who knows how to light a set that's not like 90% darkness. I like to be able to see what I'm watching.
It wasn't that
okay?
bad.
Okay?
I've
So
watched
that's the
movies
first thing
that
I'm
do
doing.
it way worse.
Well,
I can't think of any specific ones right now, but
well,
like,
yes, sure. But just because there are movies that do it worse doesn't excuse it in my eyes.
yes, it does. It just situates
It annoyed me. So that would be the
against
first
the
thing.
worst that anything has to offer.
I too would kill off 790. He'd be gone.
I wouldn't do it as an off-screen. I wouldn't be like, hey, remember 790 and how he died? Yeah, that was sad. No, I wouldn't do that. I would have him die agonizingly on screen.
Yeah, he would be destroyed. I would make sure that every particle of him was vaporized too, so we couldn't bring him back in some some BS way. What else? I don't know. I would try to have more actual sets, less like green screen rooms. I feel like that would go a long way to helping out. I would cut a lot of the subplots. I would cut every episode down to 45 minutes or less. Absolutely.
Had to get one last one in. I really only did them in episode 2.
Steven sent us an
Hell
email
yeah.
with like three in there, so I don't know. I would make it more of a mystery that needed to be solved instead of telling us everything and then just having the characters experience it. Because I think for me, an element of frustration was introduced because, sure, I get what Drano was saying in the other email, like, oh, you're like, wouldn't I make the same bad choices? Except, like, to me, I never got that feeling because I knew exactly what was going on. I had more information than they did. So, like, I could never really fully understand the decisions they were making because I already knew what was going to happen. So I never got the like schadenfreude of like, yeah, I would make that same decision and yeah, we would have died or whatever because like, I don't even know if I would have made the same decision because I never had the same amount of information as them. Anyway, getting frustrated with Lexx now. Raise my blood pressure on this podcast.
Wow.
Well, thanks for reaching out, Sergeant Drano. Nice to have you along for the ride, especially since you were the one who suggested we watch Lexx in the first place. Or one of the people who suggested it. Okay, so we've also got an email from Steven. Lexx terminate.
Bravo.
Jesus. I remember back in 2014, a friend showed I Worship a Shadow to me and my brother. His reasoning was that it would probably like Lexx because it's a sci-fi show in space. At the time, we'd finished all the Star Trek shows that were out at that point, and I was also going through Farscape and Babylon 5, both of which are excellent shows I think you two would actually like. I do think it was a stretch for people to think you'd enjoy Lexx. Anyway, I remember being kind of put off by the immature humor of the first episode, but appreciating that the fight scenes weren't too quip-filled. It wasn't enough to get me to continue, and I never would have if it weren't for Inevitable. Rewatching that first episode recently, it's not as bad as I remembered. I do agree that the mythology is interesting, but the characters aren't very likable. See, Supernova was significantly more awkward and uncomfortable to watch. What a waste of Tim Curry in a role that is unfortunate implications. Eating Pattern, while not as bad, was still pretty bad. It began with the interesting premise of feeding the Lexx, but then became a long, boring as hell story with not much interesting happening. Neither of those two episodes deserved to be 90 minutes long. I felt exhausted after this one. The finale, Gigashadow, was better in comparison, but that's not saying much. There was some nice puppetry, almost Jim Hensian or Farscape-esque. It ends on a cliffhanger where I honestly didn't realize the implication until the next episode. I've heard a couple people say Season 2 is the best, so I continued. I won't spoil important stuff, but I'll give brief impressions. The premiere Mantrid was thankfully 45 minutes and thus refreshing. The next one, Terminal, I found very enjoyable. I especially like the scene where Physician says what terrible characters the crew are. There's a certain transformation I really liked, even if the effects are outdated. I may keep watching, but I'm not expecting much. I honestly don't know why the show has a fan base, other than perhaps the fact that some people felt rebellious finding it on TV and watching it instead of whatever else was on at the time. Also, I can't remember if you discussed this, but one of the show's creators is Lexx Gigeroff, whose name we never found out how to pronounce, which sounds like a couple of the names. Cheers, Stephen.
I think it is just Lexx Gigeroff because a bit of trivia on the Lexx wiki said that Gigeroff was named after him. So.
Oh, well, there you go. Confirmed. Thanks for reaching out, Stephen. Glad to know there's someone else who didn't like it.
Yeah, we're not alone. Lexx haters unite.
He also said that some season 2 episodes he actually enjoyed. I don't know. He said lots of people consider season 2 the best. Drano said season 2 was where he started.
God, people stop tempting us to watch season 2.
I know, we really disliked Lexx. But you know what? I'm going to say this right now. I'm not going to take Lexx season 2 completely off the table just yet. I will say this. Lexx has introduced a new method for picking TV shows for Inevitable. Lexx has completely transformed the way we're doing this show.
Yeah, it has.
Was that a clap? Were you clapping?
I did earlier. I didn't right now. I did a little slow clap for one of Steven's Lexx puns. I didn't clap just right now. I don't know what made that sound that you thought was...
Something came through on the call that sounded like clapping. Anyway, so basically, moving forward, we're going to watch a couple episodes of the TV show before we do the podcast on them, which will mean the first 2-3 episodes won't be our first impressions, but we'll know if we like the show or not, at least going into doing that show. So what I'm saying is, given that I'm not going to take Lexx season 2 completely off the table, I'll watch, I don't know, not anytime soon, please God, not for another couple of months. I'll watch like 2 episodes of season 2 and see what happens.
Yeah, given that not new format, but given our new approach, yeah, I would agree. It's not necessarily even a new approach because when we watched Blake 7 for Zenith, I had already watched like the first 6 episodes. When we watched Star Cops, I had already watched, I think, the first 1 or 2 episodes.
It was 2, I think, and Children of the Stones you had already seen,
and The Prisoner
right?
I've watched twice before we watched it for the podcast. So it's not even really a new approach. It's just an approach that we kind of have always done but never codified into like, all right, we have to do it now.
You were just going to formalize it, basically. Yeah, exactly.
And you had watched a ton of Doctor Who before we watched them for Trust Your Doctor.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, there's that, I guess. Which also means that we haven't decided what we're watching for the next season of Inevitable yet, but we'll announce it when we know on the Twitter feed. Which do we have any? Twitter comments?
So again, I've been pretending to like Lexx on Twitter, but I've been trying to make it more obvious that I don't. Right, but again, Making Blake 7, friend of the podcast, friend of the show, is again threatening to block me for liking Lexx. Which, look, you can block anyone you want. You can block anyone you want, but you can't block the joy and utter, I don't know, elation that Lexx can provide. No, I'm just kidding. You actually...
Why do you hate me so?
No, and then Richard Woodward, who is a fan of the podcast, I believe, and interacts with us a lot on Twitter, says, I'm glad you covered this, even if only for a few episodes. So, glad you are glad that we covered it, Richard, and that you at least got some enjoyment of our,
glad you were glad.
So aptly and elegantly put it, Lexx hate cast. And that's it. I believe that's all we had. I'm not seeing any more on Lexx.
Well, all right then. I think Sergeant Drano sent us a text calling it a hate cast.
That's probably where he used the term. And yeah, that's it.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of season 6. Can you believe it? Season 6 of Inevitable.
Yeah, we've only been going for a year and a half. Crazy. But, I mean, we should probably...
Yeah, in
We
that
didn't really explain our plan from here, so we probably
No,
should.
yeah. I guess we should explain the plan. Normally, we go straight into triple play after we finish sort of a run through it of Inevitable, either one season or two, depending how many episodes. But we're not doing that this time. This is kind of concurrent with our plan to put Trust Your Doctor on hiatus for a while. I guess the grander plan is that instead of alternating Inevitable and Triple Play and having Trust Your Doctor run year round, the plan is to move to a system where we alternate kind of between Inevitable and Trust Your Doctor.
Our ultimate goal, if you don't know of our other podcasts or haven't listened to them, we do multiple, so as we always mention. So like our ultimate goal is to just be watching like for one podcast at once.
Yeah, because at the moment we're like,
busy.
I think we're averaging like 2 episodes of podcasts a week, or it's like 1.75, I think, with the fact that Triple Play is bi-weekly. Yeah, the goal is to move that towards closer to 1 episode per week. I think we both can make the time to keep up the podcasting schedule we're doing now, but I think we don't want to because we're burning ourselves out, first of all. Second of all, part of the reason why Inevitable was seasonal is so that we wouldn't get into like Zenith Trust Your Doctor territory where we burned ourselves out for a year. And third, it's just kind of affecting the quality of both podcasts, I think. Which is to say, we're not ending Trust Your Doctor, we're not ending Inevitable. We're just trying to move to a point where we can do them both without burning out and maintain a good level of quality in both.
Yeah, so what this basically means is that we don't actually know at this point what we're watching next, so we can't announce it. And we are going to be going on a little bit of a hiatus for this podcast, starting now.
Yeah, just in order to get the schedules to line up with everything, basically, because we've still got a couple more weeks with a little Redux run-through of Classic Who that we're doing on Trust Your Doctor.
Yep.
But the plan is basically, Inevitable will return.
Be back at some point.
Yeah.
Probably watching some old British show again, like UFO or Space 1999 or something like that. No promises, but those are ones that have definitely been high on our list for a long time.
Yeah, we've got an actual physical list now, so we have like a Google Doc that's a list.
Digital,
yeah, okay. I mean physical in that it exists and is not a nebulous concept in our minds.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, go check out Trust Your Doctor, and then once that Redux for Trust Your Doctor ends, the next season of Triple Play is going to go out, and then once that ends, that's basically when you can expect Inevitable to come back. Could be anywhere from 2 to 3 to maybe 4 months, but we will be back. James Bond will return in. And on that note, if you would like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decadentvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Lexx, or suggestions, for the next show to watch. Because we haven't decided it is up in the air. So you can find us on YouTube at Decadent Vegetable, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you find podcasts at Inevitable. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. And for now, that's it. We'll be back at some point, like we mentioned. But until then, the end.